"She will not last the night," the physician said, drawing the bedchamber door shut behind him, "and it is a pity, for she was a sweet-natured girl. But these wasting fevers are past our art. You had best prepare the family, your grace." Tristan, Duke of Marrowby, did not move from where he stood in the cold passage of Hartley Grange. He had come to this house a guest, invited to a fortnight of shooting and cards by a man he barely liked, and he had stayed, though he could not, if pressed, have entirely explained why long after the shooting was done, because in the third week of his visit the younger Miss Hartley had fallen suddenly and mysteriously ill, and something about the whole affair had set his teeth on edge and would not let him leave. "Past your art," he repeated. His voice was very quiet, which those who knew him understood to be the most dangerous thing about it. "You have bled her and dosed her and shaken your head over her for 6 days, and now you tell me it is past your art. Tell me, doctor, in your considerable experience of wasting fevers, do they generally come on within the hour of a young woman drinking a particular cup of cordial, and worsen each time she takes it, and ease on the one afternoon she could not keep it down?" The physician's face changed. "Your grace cannot mean—" "I mean nothing, I observe. It is a habit of mine." Tristan turned his dark, unhurried gaze on the man until he flinched. "You will not prepare the family. You will do nothing further to that girl, no more cordial, no more of your bleeding, and you will send at once to the town for a physician who has not spent this week in this house eating this family's dinners. Do you understand me? At once. And you will say nothing to anyone of why." He had no proof. He knew that. He had only a suspicion that had been growing colder and harder in him for 3 days, and the memory of a face. For the truth was that the Duke of Marrowby, who was known throughout society as a hard, exacting, unsentimental man, a man who valued things at their true worth and despised the fashion for valuing them at any other, had come to Hartley Grange and found, entirely unexpectedly, a person of worth in a house that did not know it possessed one. There were 2 Hartley daughters. The elder, Adela, was the acknowledged jewel-beautiful, accomplished, much courted, and Tristan had concluded within a day as hard and glittering and empty as paste. It was Adela the family displayed. It was Adela who had been arranged, with much simpering, in his path at every opportunity, for a Duke of Marrowby was a very great prize, and Mrs. Hartley had made no secret of her ambitions. And it was Adela who had watched, with a stillness that Tristan had noticed and filed away, as her younger sister began, that same week, to sicken. The younger sister was Rosamond. No one displayed Rosamond. She kept the household accounts and nursed the old grandmother and managed the still-room and was spoken of by her own family, when she was spoken of at all as useful, which in that house was very nearly an insult. She was not plain, precisely, but she had the worn, unregarded look of a person accustomed to being the one who does, and never the one who is done for. Tristan, who had learned young to distrust glitter, and to look instead at what a thing was actually made of, had within 3 days of his arrival concluded that the entire worth of Hartley Grange resided in its unregarded younger daughter, and that the family were the sort of fools who would sell the gold to keep the paste. He had told himself it was nothing to him. He had come for shooting, but he had found excuses to be where Rosamond was, the library, the still-room doorway, the terrace where she took the grandmother for air, and he had watched her be patient and competent and quietly, dryly funny in a way that no one in that house appeared to notice, and he had felt the cold, unused places in himself grow, against all his intentions, unaccountably warm. And then she had fallen ill. Within a week of the Duke of Marrowby's marked attention to the wrong sister, the useful daughter had begun to waste away of a mysterious fever growing worse by the day, tended by a cordial that her devoted elder sister prepared with her own hands and pressed upon her 3 times daily. Tristan was not a fanciful man. He was, if anything, a man who prided himself on refusing to see drama where there was none. But he had a merchant's eye for value and a magistrate's eye for cause and effect, and both of them, converging in the cold passage of Hartley Grange, told him the same intolerable thing. Someone in this house was killing the only person in it worth saving, and he had a very good idea who, and a very good idea why. It was worth pausing before the reckoning on how a hard man had come to notice a soft light in a dark corner at all, for the Duke of Marrowby was not, by nature or by habit, a man who noticed people. He noticed things. He had inherited a great fortune and had trebled it, not by luck but by an unsentimental gift for seeing what a thing was actually worth beneath what it was said to be worth. He had bought neglected land that others thought played out, and sold glittering ventures that others thought sure, and been right so consistently that men who disliked him came to him for judgment all the same. He applied the same cold eye to people, and had found, over the years, that most of them were priced far above their value, all surface, all performance, worth exactly what they cost to entertain and nothing kept in reserve. It had made him lonely and it had made him exacting, and he had long since ceased to expect that any person would surprise him. Rosamund Hartley had surprised him within an hour of his arrival, and she had done it without the slightest intention of being noticed at all. He had come down early the first morning, before the family had assembled their public faces, and had wandered into the wrong wing looking for coffee, and had found instead an open door to the still room, where the younger daughter stood at a scarred oak table with her sleeves pushed up and a smear of something green across her wrist, weighing dried herbs on a little brass balance with the absorbed competence of a person who has done a thing 10,000 times and thinks no one is watching. She had not simpered when she saw him. She had not arranged herself. She had said, "You have lost your way, your grace. The breakfast room is 2 doors past the stairs and mine the loose board," and gone back to her weighing, and he had stood in the doorway a full minute, unaccountably reluctant to leave. He had watched her after that, the way he watched a piece he suspected of being undervalued, closely, quietly, testing his first impression against the evidence of days. And the evidence had mounted. He saw her carry the querulous grandmother out to the terrace every afternoon and sit with her though the old woman scolded her for it. He saw her settle a dispute between 2 servants with a fairness that would have done a magistrate credit. He heard her once through an open window, reading aloud to the grandmother from a book of travels, and doing all the voices and laughing a warm, unguarded sound he never once heard her make in company. For in company she was silent, effacing, useful, careful never to draw a glance from her dazzling sister. And he had understood, with the certainty that had made his fortune, that the entire worth of Hartley Grange had been misfiled. The family kept the diamond in the window and the masterwork in the back room, and dusted the window daily, and had forgotten the back room existed. He had told himself sternly that it was no affair of his. He had a great house of his own to return to, and no earthly reason to concern himself with the domestic economy of a family he barely liked. But he had found himself lingering. He had found himself contriving to be in the library when she came to fetch a volume, in the passage when she carried the grandmother's tray, on the terrace in the late afternoon. He had found himself, at 8:30, hard and unsentimental and long past such things, watching for the sound of a particular light step, and being absurdly glad when it came. He had not called it love. He had not called it anything. He was a man who distrusted words applied to feelings, preferring to let the ledger speak. But the ledger in this case had been speaking very clearly for some days, when the younger Miss Hartley took her first cup of her devoted sister's cordial and began, quietly and inexplicably, to die. And the Duke of Marrowby discovered, in the cold clutch of alarm that seized him at her sick-room door, precisely how much he had come to value the one thing in that house that no one else could see. He acted that night, and he acted carefully, for he was a man who understood that an accusation without proof only warns the guilty and endangers the innocent. He did not raise the alarm. He simply made himself, quietly and immovably, the master of the sick-room. He informed Mrs. Hartley, in the tone that brooked no reply, that as a guest much in the family's debt, he would take it upon himself to see the new physician settled and the patient properly watched, and that he had engaged a nurse from the town, a stranger, unconnected to the house, to sit with Miss Rosamund through the nights. And he gave that nurse 2 instructions privately, and paid her well to follow them without question: that nothing whatever was to pass Miss Rosamund's lips but what came sealed and unopened from the town apothecary, and that the cordial, should any be brought, was to be received with thanks, set aside, and given quietly into the Duke's own hand. The change was not immediate, but it was unmistakable. On the second night, with no more of the cordial reaching her, Rosamund's fever broke. On the third, she took broth and kept it. On the fourth, when Tristan came at dawn to relieve the nurse, he found her awake, wax-pale and hollow-eyed and weak as a kitten, but looking at him with a clear and puzzled gaze that went through him like sunlight through a cold room. "Your Grace," she said, her voice a thread, "they tell me you have been sitting up with me. That cannot be right. Dukes do not sit up with the useful daughter." "This one does." He drew the chair to the bedside and sat so that she need not strain to see him. "You have been very ill, Miss Hartley. You are past the worst of it now. You must rest and eat and let yourself be waited upon for once in your life, which I suspect will be the hardest physic of all for you to swallow." The ghost of a smile touched her cracked lips. "You have observed me, then?" "I have observed you a great deal. I have observed that you run this entire house and are thanked for none of it. I have observed that you are the only person under this roof who does not perform. And I have observed," he chose the words with care, for she was weak and he would not frighten her, "that your illness came on and worsened in a manner I did not like, and eased the moment I saw to it that you took nothing but what I could vouch for. I will not distress you with more than that, not yet. But I would ask you one thing, and I would have you answer me honestly, because your answer matters more than you can know. The cordial you were given, who prepared it?" He watched the question land. He watched her want to deflect it, to protect, to smooth things over as she had spent her life smoothing things over. And then he watched her decide, with the honesty he had loved in her from the still-room doorway, to tell the truth. "Adela," Rosamond whispered, "my sister, she made it herself. She was so attentive everyone remarked how devoted she was, sitting with me, bringing it 3 times a day with her own hands. Something moved behind her eyes, some slow and terrible arithmetic. She has never once in her life brought me anything with her own hands. I was too ill to wonder at it." The color that little remained drained from her face. "Your Grace, you are not saying she is my sister." "I am saying nothing I can yet prove," Tristan said gently, "and I will say nothing at all to the house until I can. But I will say this to you, and I would have you hold to it. You are safe now. I have made it so. Nothing will reach you again that has not passed through hands I trust. Whatever the truth of the cordial proves to be, you will not be made to drink another drop of it, and you will not be left alone in the dark to wonder whether the next cup is the one that finishes what the last began. I give you my word, and I do not," he added in the low, dangerous voice, "give it lightly." Tears slid down her wasted face, and she was too weak to wipe them. "Why?" she asked. "Why should a Duke of Marrowby trouble himself over the useful daughter? You came for my father's shooting. You could go home tomorrow and forget this house entirely. No one would blame you. No one would even wonder." Tristan was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, the gray dawn was coming up over the parkland, and the household still slept, and the two of them were alone in the hush, and he found he wanted to answer her honestly more than he had wanted anything in years. "Because when I came to this house," he said, "I found a great deal of glitter and one thing of real worth, and I watched the family polish the glitter and neglect the gold, and it made me angrier than I have been in a long time. I have spent my whole life among people who cannot tell paste from the true stone. I value things at what they are, Miss Hartley. It is the one gift I have, and it has made me few friends. And I looked at you, running that still room, nursing that old woman, thanked by no one, seen by no one, and I knew exactly what I was looking at. I was looking at the only person in this house worth crossing a room for. So no. I will not go home tomorrow and forget it. I do not intend to leave this house at all until I am certain that the gold in it is safe, and then, if she will permit me, I intend never to leave her unregarded again." Rosamond mended slowly, and the Duke of Marrowby, to the growing bewilderment of the household, showed no sign whatever of departing. He gave out that he found the country air agreeable, which no one believed, for the Duke of Marrowby was not a man who cared for air. Mrs. Hartley, who had staked her every ambition on securing him for Adela, watched his continued residence with a hope that curdled by degrees into unease, for he did not court Adela at all now. He was scrupulously, coldly polite to her, and spent his days, when he was not seeing to a state correspondence in the library that Mr. Hartley had nervously placed at his disposal in the vicinity of the sick-room. And then, as Rosamond grew stronger, of the still room and the terrace and the small parlor where the recovering daughter took her broth and her few permitted visitors. He brought the town physician back a second time and a third quietly, and had him examine the sealed jar of remaining cordial that the nurse had set aside on that first night. And what the physician found in it, testing it by the careful methods of his craft, Tristan kept locked in a drawer of the library desk and mentioned to no one. Not yet. He was building something the way he built everything, patiently, thoroughly, so that when it was finished it would not fall. But the days of Rosamund's mending were not all vigilance and evidence. They were, to Tristan's own quiet astonishment, the happiest days he had known in 20 years. He sat with her. That was all at first. He sat with the useful daughter while she convalesced, and he found he could not stay away. She was too weak in the early days for much talk, and so he read to her, which he had never done for anyone, choosing the driest histories on the assumption that they would send her decently to sleep, only to discover that she argued with them, and with him, in a thread of a voice, and knew more of the rain in question than he did, and corrected him with a dry pleasure that made him want to be corrected all day long. "You are the only man of my acquaintance," she told him once, propped on her pillows, "who does not seem to mind being told he is wrong." "I mind it a great deal," Tristan said, "when I am told so by fools. I have discovered that I like it enormously when I am told so by you. It appears the pleasure of a thing depends entirely on the worth of the person offering it. I had not known that before. I have led a somewhat impoverished life on that account, I think." As her strength returned, so did more of her, the competence he had first admired, the dry humor, and at last something she had plainly buried very deep and very long, a self she had never been permitted to show anyone. She had opinions, he found, on everything, and had been trained her whole life to keep them behind her teeth so as not to outshine Adela, who had none. She had read, in stolen hours, half the library. She had a gift for figures that had been quietly harnessed to the household accounts and never once praised. She had, in short, all the worth in the world and had been raised to believe herself worth nothing but her usefulness. And Tristan, watching her unfold in the safety he had built around her, felt a slow, protective fury at every year she had spent unseen. "You look at me," Rosamund said to him one afternoon on the terrace, the grandmother dozing under her shawl nearby, "as though I were a great deal more than the person who keeps the still room. No one has ever looked at me so. I confess I do not quite know what to do with it. I keep expecting you to realize your error and look at Adela instead, as everyone always does in the end." "I have looked at Adela," Tristan said, "and I have looked at you, and I promise you my sight is in excellent order." He turned to face her fully. "Shall I tell you the difference as I see it? Your sister is like a diamond in a shop window cut to catch the light, dazzling from across the room and worth precisely what a diamond is worth, which is to say, exactly its price and not 1 penny more. You are like a thing I once saw at an auction, dismissed by the whole room, a plain dark old cabinet that no one would bid on. I bought it for a song. And when I got it home and cleaned it, it proved to be a masterwork, the finest piece in my house, made by a hand no one alive can match, worth more than every glittering thing in the room that had ignored it. The room could not see it. I could. That is the whole of my talent, Rosamund. I can see what a thing is truly worth. And I am telling you plainly, you are the finest thing in this house, and the fact that no one in it can see so is their poverty and not your want of worth." The reckoning came on a bright cold morning 3 weeks after Rosamund had first taken broth and kept it. Tristan had chosen the moment with care. Rosamund was strong enough now to sit downstairs, wrapped in shawls in the corner of the drawing-room, and he had insisted, in the way that could not be refused, that the whole family assemble and that the town physician be present, and a magistrate who happened to be an old friend of the Duke's and had ridden over that morning at his particular request. Mrs. Hartley fluttered and beamed, certain at last that his grace meant to announce for Adela. Adela arranged herself becomingly by the window in the best light. Mr. Hartley looked confused and hopeful, and Rosamund, in her corner, watched the Duke with a still, wary understanding, for she alone knew what was in the locked drawer. "I have trespassed on your hospitality a long while," Tristan began, and his quiet voice filled the room, "and I mean today to explain why. When I came to this house I was a guest at your shooting. I have stayed because, in my 3rd week here, your younger daughter fell suddenly and gravely ill of what your own physician pronounced a wasting fever past the reach of his art, and I did not believe him. I did not believe him because I have an unfashionable habit of noticing things, and I noticed that Miss Rosamond sickened only after taking a certain cordial, worsened with every dose of it, and began to mend on the single day she could not keep it down. The room had gone very still. Adela's becoming pose had frozen. I engaged a nurse unconnected to this house, Tristan went on, and I gave her one instruction, that the cordial was to be received with thanks and given quietly into my hand rather than into Miss Rosamond's. From that night the cordial reached her no more. From that night she recovered, and the jar that was set aside I gave to Dr. Fenwick here, who has tested its contents by the methods of his profession. He drew the sealed paper from his coat and handed it to the magistrate. Dr. Fenwick will tell you what a healing cordial does not, and should not, contain. The physician cleared his throat and named it. A preparation, he said gravely, of a kind used in small doses to steady the heart, but in the quantity present in that cordial, and given 3 times daily to a person in health, certain over weeks to counterfeit exactly the wasting fever the family had been told to expect. There was no innocent reason for it to be there. It had been put there by a hand that meant it to be there. Mrs. Hartley's beaming face collapsed into blankness. Mr. Hartley half rose, and every eye in the room turned slowly to the beauty at the window, the devoted sister who had prepared the cordial with her own hands and pressed it upon the invalid 3 times a day, remarked by all for her tenderness. You cannot, Adela's voice came out high and cracked, all the glitter gone from it in an instant. It is a lie, a wicked lie. Why should I, she is my sister, but her eyes darted guilty to Tristan, and everyone saw them dart, and the truth of it was written across her face for the whole room to read. She had done it. And she had done it, everyone now understood, because a Duke of Marrowby had come to Hartley Grange and, against every expectation, had turned his attention not to the jewel the family displayed, but to the useful daughter in the still room, and Adela, who had never in her life been second to Rosamond at anything, could not endure to be second at this, and had reached for a cordial rather than lose the prize she had been raised to believe was hers by right. Tristan let the silence do its work. He did not rage. Rage was for men without proof. He simply stood immovable while the beauty's careful edifice came down around her, while her mother wept and her father put his face in his hands, while the magistrate rose to do his sober duty. What followed? The questioning. The confession dragged out piece by piece. The quiet arrangements made to spare the family the full public scandal in exchange for Adela's removal to a distant relation's care, under stern supervision Tristan attended to with cold thoroughness, and it need not be dwelt upon, for it was not the part of the day he cared about. The part he cared about came after, when the room had emptied of magistrate and physician and weeping parents, and only he and Rosamond remained, she still wrapped in her shawls in the corner, white and shaken, the sister she had loved and served all her life exposed as the one who had tried to end it. He crossed the room and knelt by her chair, careful of her weakness, and took her cold hand in his. I am sorry, he said. There was no gentle way to do it. She had to be stopped, and stopped provably, or she would have tried again, and I would not risk you. But I know what it costs to learn such a thing of one's own blood, and I am sorry you had to learn it at all. Rosamond's tears fell quietly. She hated me so much, she whispered. All those years I thought I was simply overlooked. I did not know I was hated. I did not know that keeping the still room and nursing grandmother and asking for nothing had earned me that. She looked at him, stricken and lost. I have no one now. My sister is disgraced and gone. My parents will never look at me without seeing the ruin I brought down on the house, though I did nothing but survive. I am 23, and I have kept a household my whole life, and been thanked by no one, and now I am to be blamed even for living. What is to become of me? That, said Tristan, is the one thing in all of this that is entirely within my power to answer, and I have been waiting a great many weeks to answer it. He did not let go of her hand. You will not stay in this house to be blamed for surviving, he said. You are worth more than every soul in it, and I will not leave the gold on the neglected shelf one day longer. Rosamond Hartley, I have watched you nurse and manage and endure, unseen, unthanked, uncomplaining, and I have watched you nearly die of another's envy, and through the whole of it I have been more certain of you than I have ever been of anything in my life. I came to this house able to see the true worth of things and finding no one else who could. I would spend the rest of my days beside the one person here who never needed telling what she was worth, because she was too busy being it. Marry me. Not out of rescue, though God knows you have earned a rescue. Marry me, because I am a hard, exacting, difficult man who has finally found the one thing he values above his own judgment, and cannot bear to be parted from it. Be my duchess. Let me spend my life doing what your family never did and seeing you. Rosamund looked at him, at the hard face gone unaccountably gentle, at the man who had sat up through her fevered nights and read her dry histories and knelt now on the drawing-room floor with her cold hand in both of his, and the lostness in her face gave way, at last, to something she had never in her life been permitted to feel: the certainty of being wanted for exactly what she was. You truly see me, she said wonderingly. Not the useful one, not the overlooked one, me. I have seen no one else since the still-room doorway, said Tristan. I only had to keep you alive long enough to tell you so. Then yes, said Rosamund, and for the first time in the whole of her surviving, unregarded life, she let herself be the one who was chosen. Yes, take me somewhere I am seen, and I will spend my life proving your eye was true. It is always true, said the Duke of Marrowby, and lifted her cold hand to his lips, but it has never in its life been so glad to be right. He married her before the summer was out, and took her home to a great house where the finest thing in every room was the plain, dark cabinet he had rescued from an auction. No one else could read, and, beside it, always, the wife he had rescued from a family who could not read her either. She managed his estates with the gift for figures no one had ever praised, and argued his histories with him by the fire, and was seen, every day for the whole of her life, by the one man who had never once mistaken paste for gold. And if she thought, now and then, of the sister who had hated her enough to poison her, it was without bitterness in the end, for Adela's envy, monstrous as it had been, had done the one thing a lifetime of devotion never had. It had brought Rosamund to the notice of the only man alive who could tell exactly what she was worth, and had loved her for it, and had never let her be overlooked again.